Hello everybody. I'm very happy to be here in Athens, and I'm very happy that this seminar become at the end of reality. I will try to give just some insights into the origins and the main characteristics of the economic boom and the crisis in Spain. So I'm not going to talk about the international scenario or the social movements, because I think we will have enough time to talk about these issues in the following days. I have borrowed from Logan and Molotov's, as many of you will know, the popular concept of urban growth machine. Although they originally applied this concept in the 70s in the American cities, I think it can be useful nowadays in the Spanish case, because they have a lot of similarities what have happened in Spain. First, the development of policies towards urban development and the increase of real estate market prices. Second, the creation of coalitions of agents, regimes, and elites like politicians, political parties, institutions, banks, real estate agencies, developers towards pro-growth strategies. And finally, the construction of an imaginary, social imaginary, where the only way to achieve wealth and employment is by a growth strategy based on incessant urbanization. Here is the Urban Fortunes, the popular book of Logan and Molotov, and other authors like Emmanuel Rodriguez and Isidro Lopez talk about the long wave of Hispanic capitalism in a more classic Marxist terms. I think both perspectives are compatible. In fact, if you want to understand the crisis of Spain, you must read this book. I think it's not translated yet, but I recommend this book, because many of my explanations are based on their contributions. So, the roots of the antecedents of the Spanish growth machine can be seen in the transition from industrialism, the Spanish industrialism, to we can call the Spanish urban revolution. In other words, the crisis of the Far East economy was progressively replaced with an economy based on urban development, tourism, and services associated with consumption. The antecedents of the economic boom can be divided in three periods: the period of the Far East crisis from the 70s to the 80s, a period of growth, and the first real estate property crisis in the beginning of the 90s. Why I'm going to explain why why started the first financial real estate growth cycle. There are a lot of factors, but I want to stress the integration of Spain in the European Union, the European Economic Community at that time, in 1986, because contributed decisively to overcoming the Spanish Far East crisis. The European structural funds and cohesion funds permitted the expansion, for instance, of infrastructures, firstly highways, later high-speed trains, and so on, and opened up vast quantities of land for development. In addition, when capital from international markets come to Spain to be invested in tourism and in urban assets. The integration of Spain into European Economic Community fueled the closure of the less competitive manufacturers. It also changed the most competitive ones from national to international companies. But only the big companies of two sectors, apart from which relied on the state, become stronger and remained in the hands of national elites. These were the banks and the building companies, who became very important agents in the following period. Internally, the Spanish government approved new rules in the field of housing and the land use to liberalize the housing market against renting and the land market. The conversion of Spanish families to a society of owners, as Rodriguez and Lopez put it, I think is the key process to understanding the subsequent bubble. It enabled Spanish families to make money enough to housing market and gain access to the credit, to private debt for personal consumption. So at the end, housing, yes, was a basic necessity to cover, but it was also a way of saving money, a way of investing money, and a way of borrowing money. The Spanish growth machine fueled basically for the incessant increase of the housing prices and worked through a virtuous growth cycle of interest between several agents. I'm only going to stop in a few of them, in the key ones, to explain how the regime worked. First, banks and cajas de ahorro, the regional saving banks in Spain, had access to huge amount of capital from the international market. Basically, from the core European countries such as Germany and France, which saw Spain in a perfect place to invest and to have a rapid gains, quick gains. Also, the banks and saving banks invested greatly in real estate projects with the help of very low interest rates from the European Central Bank. In the peak of the boom, the 70% of the credit from regional saving banks was invested in the real estate sector, the 70%, not in a productive economy. Regarding the central government, in line with the agreements to the Maastricht Treaty, the central government reduced during the bubble its public debt and improved its income from labor and taxes on economic activity. It was also able to drastically reduce the levels of unemployment and improve its position in the international forums such as the European Union or G8. This was the morning when our ex-president Zapatero said that the Spanish government put Spain in the Champions League of the world economies. In any case, one important difference, I think, from other countries like Italy, Greece, or even France or Germany was the low rate of debt of the government in relation to the GDP. See, the debt was basically from the families and companies. Regarding the local governments, in the last few decades, the Spanish local governments have assumed a lot of new responsibilities in relation to social welfare, but without appropriate funding, be it from local taxes or transfers from the central government. Currently, 30% of local government income comes from housing and real estate development. Moreover, the boosterism and the competition between cities to have the best opera, cultural center or conference palace increased the investment in this type of infrastructure and its maintenance. We could add as well in this net some political parties as well, that because they were beneficiaries of the Spanish growth machine through basically corrupt practices. For instance, they obtained money from building companies in exchange for access to favorable contracts. Many commentators will include individuals and families on this list because the increase in property value, high unemployment, and general increase of consumption. It's true that the increase in the value properties markets created like a wealth effect, but it just was just an illusion because families' income from salaries went down along these periods, as this statistic shows, the blue line, and it shows how during the 90s and 2000s the salaries go down. At the end, go up just because the jobs with low salaries were destroyed, so the average come up. The high level of consumption was only maintained at the expense of tremendous rise in debt, both in business and families. During the last decade, had been a lot of institutional reforms. I just will tell some of them. Basically, after initially denying the existence of the crisis, the government's first measures were to try to give more fuel to the building sector via traditional Keynesian measures. Just three examples. From 2009-2010, the government invested 13 billion euros in the local investment fund to finance public works. The government housing plan from 2009 to 2012 invested 10 billion euros to help people to buy houses. And only in the first month of 2008, the government commit 6 billion euros to public works, as 170% more than the previous year. Although Zapatero declared that Spain has the most solid financial system in the international community, public aid was subsequently used to save several banks from bankruptcy. They had accumulated a lot of developed land and houses from promoters and real estate companies that had gone bankrupt. And with the help of, as you know, the history, with the help of public funds, a huge process of bank restructuring began. It's difficult to know the exactly amount of money that the state has given to the banks, but the official statistics talk about 100 billion united in public endorsements from 2008 to 2012. About the second phase, in response to significant pressures from the European Union, the Socialist Party took one more neoliberal agenda in 2010. So although the bailout of the banking sector was officially approved in June 2012, from 2010 Spain was in fact under the intervention of Troika. Maybe you know the history, but just in 1 week, and with the agreement of the Popular Party, they changed the Spanish constitution to limit the deficit of public administrations. From that time, legally it's most important to buy the investors than the pensionists. In the election of 2012, the Popular Party won with an absolute majority and continued to follow the same policies. After all the reforms, external audits of the Spanish banking system found a haul of 90 billion of euros, so the past reforms didn't work for too much, related to toxic real estate assets. And nowadays, most of these assets are going to transfer to a bad bank, which will manage around 25,100 housing units. So this will be the public-private society and the biggest real estate agency of Spain. I'm just going to talk about which have been the social and political consequences of the Spanish crisis. After the real estate and financial sector bubble burst, the crisis polluted the whole economy. The end of the continuous appreciation of real estate properties put an end on the wealth effect. Initially, the most affected were workers in the building sector, but the cuts in public spending, the decrease in consumption, and the restriction of credit caused the destruction of many companies and businesses, with, at the same time, the unemployment increased in both the public and private sector. So this is the evolution of the unemployment rate. And it's interesting because it's different from the regions that were where the housing bubble was more high, and shows a very difference between the south and the north. So there is not only difference between the south and the north of Europe, there are also big, huge difference between the north and south, at least in Spain. After the several labor reforms, so the latest data shows that 26% of the active population is unemployment. It's almost 6 million people. And the latest figures on unemployment also shows that 1.8 million families, more than 10%, have no family members in work. Only financial assistance from family members or income gained by informal methods can explain why the social tension has not gotten even worse. About the poverty during the economic boom, and this shows these numbers, the level of poverty was not reduced, but it has increased during the crisis. Currently, the amount of people below the poverty is around 21% in Spain. It's higher than Greece, Italy, and Portugal. At the same time, the index inequality in Spain is the highest of the European Union 27, just after Lithuania. And what were the consequences in the field of politics? Well, the first consequence of the crisis and the implementation of the austerity measures was the defeat of Socialist Party in the 2012 elections. Minority and leftist party won some seats, but the established bipartisan system gave the majority to the Popular Party. I think that the most important effect in the field of politics is the growing mistrust of politicians and political parties. And I think it's very common in the other countries, the southern countries. Firstly, for the policies that they started after the crisis that burdened the population, we are not a commodity in the hands of politicians and bankers, was one of the most famous slogans in the 15th movement. But more and more, the politicians are being seen as a privileged and corrupted caste that only look for themselves and their friends. Currently in Spain, more than 300 elected officials have been impeached on anti-corruption charges. And the last scandal, as you already know, is the implication of the President Mariano Rajoy to taking part in illegal party funding. I think in this respect, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, yes, are in the Champions League of political corruption. Finally, just to add, I would like to add some words about the environmental, urban, and local consequences of the crisis. Firstly, I just want to stress a very obvious idea, is that the traditional development, the territorial development during the bubble was highly unsustainable. During these years, the emissions of CO2 increased exponentially, much more than the Kyoto Protocol permitted. The construction of infrastructure and housing units required, of course, a vast extension of land. As a consequence, many fertile fields, biodiversity were reduced, and cultural, historical, and social landscapes were destroyed. From 1987 to 2010, the use of artificial land has increased 44%, while the population was only increased 15%. In spite of the amount of empty houses that still remain in around 1 million of housing units empty, the housing crisis continues in Spain. Most people can afford to buy a house because young people are unemployed, and because the credit is restricted. The private rental market is still expensive, and the amount of state-subsidized housing for rent is small. As a result, the average age people live the family home is 30 in Spain, and the European average is 21. But accessibility to home is getting worse. Many people who left the family homes are coming up. Every day, more than 500 evictions of people that can afford to pay the rent or mortgage in Spain. Recently, a series of people have committed suicide because they were going to be evicted from their homes. My colleague from the PA will explain this situation in more detail. And last but not least, local governments are getting into a new situation. The decrease of transfers from central government, the reduction of income from taxes related with the housing sector, and decreased expenses related with the period boom are driving local governments into a significant economic difficulties. As a result, there have been cuts in local budgets and public land assets and services are being sold or privatized, as we're going to explain in the case of Barcelona. For instance, local public water companies are being sold to holding companies that see public sector services as the promising market niche. At the same time, the most important cities are continuing using the conventional strategies in order to attract international events such as the Olympic Games or by facilitating the building of mega casinos, as we will see in the case of Madrid and Barcelona too. To sum up, we can affirm that the Spanish political regime, built at the end of Franco's dictatorship, is, yes, in rapid decomposition. The growth machine is very difficult to fix. The Troika nowadays is ruling the main economic and social policies, and the government has lost the trust of the people. So the question that remains is what will the result of all this be? The emergence of new populations, or maybe hope a deep democratic revolution? Okay, thank you very much.